I really like this quote from Soren Kierkegaard's Purity of Heart is to Will One Thing. He was a Danish philosopher, existentialist philosopher, and he wrote this book called The Purity of Heart is to Will One Thing, inspired by Matthew 5:8, right, where it says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And he writes in his book, only the eternal is always appropriate and always present, is always true. Only the eternal applies to each human being, whatever his age may be. And it seems profound to me when we think about what is always relevant, what is always appropriate, what is always present to us. It's the eternal. It's the eternal things of God. No matter how young you are or how old you are, that is what persists. That is what persists. He was motivated to write that book from that verse in Matthew 5:8. And I was thinking about purity of heart, right? The purity of heart being to will one thing. I think a lot of times when we think about purity, like what is it to have a pure heart, our thoughts immediately go to, well, it's to not think naughty things, right? Or it's to make sure you follow all the rules, or to make sure you're just, all buttoned up and are a certain way, right? But this notion of the purity of heart being to will one thing, I think, takes us deeper. I think it takes us into something that is profound and significant. And so that is what we're going to spend our time discussing today. There's a verse in Matthew 6:22, if you'd like to turn there for me. And this is going to be the anchor text for our discussion today. Depending on your translation, it might read a little bit differently. Maybe you have the NIV and it says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. The NASB reads, the eye is the lamp of the body. Then, if your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. The KJV, and I really like how the KJV translates this verse, it says, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. It's a very interesting passage. However you read it, whatever translation, it's an interesting passage. And we know in context, if we read later on, Jesus is talking about, what are you focused on? You can't serve God and money, right? You can't serve God and the world. But this translation to me is interesting. If thine eye be single. The word translated single here comes from the Greek haplous. Stephen can be my Greek corrector, or Rick. And according to Strong's dictionary, it literally refers to something uncompounded, something without folds, or something that is simple. And if this is the case, then this verse is, I feel, becomes very interesting. Not that it wasn't interesting before, but it seems to take on a whole new significance. Consider the eye, right? What is the eye, right? It's an organ. It's an organ by which is it technically called an organ? Like your other organs? It's an organ, right? It's a body part. But it's the organ by which we see, right? We see and perceive things in the world through our eyes. We come to understand, to know through the world of our sight. Of course, other senses are involved in in how we come to know things, right? Our hearing, our taste, our touch, our smell. All of these are facets of coming to understand, of encountering sensible reality. But I believe the eye has a special place or designation generally, whether it's ancient literature or even modern literature. It's been used metaphorically to refer to a person's will or intentions, one's innermost thoughts. That is, the eye is that which that is by which you gaze upon something else, right? The object of your desire or will. It's through the eye that happens. And going back to ancient there's different cultural literary contexts where this is presented. Whether it's Dostoevsky or even psychological works such as Freud, though I don't give Freud too much credit these days, though a lot of people do. He was a weird guy. Or even in Plato's Republic, the allegory of the cave and seeing out the truth, like that is the truth out there where the sun is. But in the allegory of the cave, the man is left in the cave and all he sees is shadows on the wall, and he believes that's real, but what's really real is out there. This sight, what he sees to be real. Even in more modern contexts, we see things like in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, right? The eye, Sauron's eye. There it is there. You can see it looking around, that big, malevolent eye, searching, looking. What is Sauron's eye looking for? It's looking for the ring, right? The ring to rule them all, right? It's outward, it's focused, it's searching for something. It has an object of desire that it's looking for. And if this translation be true, let thine eye, the eye is the lamp of the body, let thine eye be single, and thy whole body shall be full of light. This is interesting. What is the object of our desire? What are we fixated on? If the I here is referring to our intentions, our will, our desire, it seems to me it's really referring to kind of the seat of those things, which is the heart, right? What do we pursue? What do we desire? What do we fixate on? Let thine eye be single. It seems to refer to a certain kind of single-mindedness, right? As opposed to double-mindedness. I couldn't find any other places in the text, at least in the New Testament, it's Greek, where this word is used, but you kind of find its opposite in James 1:8, where James says that a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. And a theme throughout the book of James is the very idea of combating, at least one of the themes is combating double-mindedness. James contrasts faith without works. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Let not cursing and blessing come out of the same mouth. Do not show distinction or partiality among believers, among God's household, right? Do not pretend to be something you're not. The book of James gives us that challenge to not be double-minded in the ways that we think, the ways that we feel, the way that we act. And so I think this idea of single-mindedness or having a focused will is not foreign to the text of Scripture. And I believe that's what's going on here when Jesus is talking about thine eye being single. He's really talking about the intention and will, that is our heart. There is a quality of the heart that results in light as opposed to darkness. And I don't know about you. I mentioned this morning. It's difficult for me to even get out of bed or walk a few steps or drive to work or whatever without my will being continuously divided. If there's anything we struggle with, it's that discipline of will, having a single-mindedness, of developing and nurturing a clarity and focus of our wills. And so, to Kierkegaard's book, to his, I think I skipped a whole bunch of passages. James 1:8, there we go. to what I mentioned before, to have a purity of heart is to not be divided in your will, to not be divided in your intentions, to will one thing, to be focused, to have clarity on one thing. And we have to ask ourselves then, what is that one thing? What is it? Any thoughts? To be holy? Setting your priorities on the heavenly? Okay. I think that kind of intersects with being holy in a way. Yeah, I think these are good answers. I think that the thing that we should will, that we should set our gaze upon, this might sound simple, it might sound like, well, this is just very elementary, but it is God and what He, and the good that He provides. It's pursuing the good in truth. The good, capital G, right, is ultimately God. We pursue the good insofar as we pursue and accept God and what He has provided for us. And when I look at the text of Scripture, this seems to be the problem we have from the very beginning. In the beginning, how did God create things? How did He describe His creation? Very good, right? At the end, He sums it all up. He sees all that He's made, and He says that is very good. Every refrain, each day ends with the refrain, and God saw that it was good. And at the very end, and God saw all that He has made, and behold, it was very good. But something happened, right? We know that God only provided good in the beginning, but then we also saw an abuse of a good, that is our freedom. We saw the misalignment of will, of choosing not good, of choosing that which God did not intend for man, and we get the fall. We see in the beginning pages of Genesis, in chapter 2, the serpent came and deceived man, implying that God had withheld some good from him. In Genesis 3:6, it says, when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate, and she gave also to her husband, and he ate. Let me ask you something. Was the tree of knowledge good and evil? Was it good? Yes. Why do you say that? That's right. God only created good, right? He only created good. Follow-up question. Was it a good God provided for man in the garden? For man. Was it for man to have? No. He told them not to eat it, right. It was not the thing which He provided for them. It was not to be their sustenance and nutrition, at least not at that time. We see in Revelation access to the tree of, no, it's the tree of life, not good and evil. Mixing things up. Anyways, it was not provided for them. He had provided all the fruit of the trees and of the field for man to be sustained by. They'd be sustained by God's good provision. He did not provide this for them. And man said, no, this is good, which God has withheld from me. I will take and eat of it. I will take the good for myself. So we see that the tree of knowledge, good and evil was good. God made it. It wasn't some evil object, right? But it wasn't what God provided for them. It wasn't what God provided for them. And this is how the serpent did his work. He appealed to the goodness of the tree and its desirability for knowledge, right? These are good qualities, good things about the tree, but he mixed in a lie. God did not provide the tree for them. It was not part of God's provision for man, right? And so Eve, while recognizing the good qualities of God's creation, it was good. It was not the good that God provided for her. She did not pursue the good in truth, right? She allowed lie and deception to creep in. And this is informative for us, and we see this repeated through the text of the Bible, but purity of heart consists of willing and pursuing what God wills and desires for us, pursuing God and the good He's provided. All this may seem very simple, but I think it's actually very difficult for us in practice. It's challenging. We can say all these things, but in practice, do we fixate? Do we set our gaze, our intentions, and our will on God and the good He has provided? Do we really? You know, we just had this men's retreat yesterday, well, Friday and Saturday, and you know, our theme was this idea of being steadfast and immutable, you know, not changing, being steadfast and abounding in the work of the Lord. For our labor, our toil is not in vain. And I don't know, just speaking as a man, I can't speak for other men, but I'm pretty sure we struggle with this idea of being steadfast, of being this enduring presence that labors for the Lord, that seeks the good, that is the good that God has provided. Our wills are often divided. And sometimes we do seek good things, but we don't seek them in truth. The easiest example, illustration of this for me personally is going to have to do my relationship with my wife or with my kids. You know, I desire the good for my daughter Lydia, right? I want her to know and to love God, and to seek Him and what He's provided. And you know, parents, you're familiar with this. Your kids don't do that. They don't do that a lot of the time. And it blesses our heart when we see them do that, right? But I've found, especially when it comes to discipline, you discipline your kids because you love them, because you want them to seek the good. But I've found that sometimes, hopefully not the majority of the time, that I will seek the good for them, but not in truth. What might that look like? Well, a couple different ways. You know, Lydia or Aronia, they're misbehaving, they're doing something bad. I try to redirect them to something good, right? But maybe they're also annoying me too. Right? And that is actually what motivates the action that I take, the disciplinary action. You know, I just want them to stop doing this. It's bad, right? It is bad. Like, we can say it's a bad thing. They shouldn't do that. But then maybe you lash out. Maybe you don't give them a just punishment or discipline, right? Maybe in your pursuit, in your zeal to correct them, you actually do damage to their soul. But what's going on there is I'm seeking the good for my kid, but I'm also seeking something for myself, some reprieve from their annoyance or disobedience. But it's not about me as the parent. It should be about them. And so I think this should inform us. In that particular case, it informs me how I bring discipline to my child, how I interact with my spouse. I'm sure some of you have had, for those of you who are married, have had arguments with your spouse. Or maybe if your kids, maybe you've had arguments with your parents. And maybe you feel justified or whatever it is, and whatever you think or want to do or is the right thing to do, but you don't go about it in truth. It can do damage. And really all of this, and these are just a few examples, maybe you can think of some yourself, are just, it's a sign of double-mindedness. It's this sign of not having our intentions and our will on the good that God provides. I think this whole idea of God being the ultimate good, and he has provided us with good that we should pursue, is all-encompassing. It's permeating everything. And primarily, I think we see this in our relationships. We're dealing with eternal beings, creatures made in the image of God, creatures of value, eternal value and worth. Do we treat them like that? Or do we allow our own desires, our own intentions to, I don't know, maybe spoil our efforts in some ways? Those are just a few examples. There's other examples, right? Our wills are divided amongst many things. Be whatever needs or cares you have, pursuits you have, pursuit of enjoyment, this or that, material object or status or whatever. And I think a lot of times we tend to spend time justifying our desires. We find some good somewhere. Like, well, if I pursue this, it would be good in this way, right? But is it really, like, okay, that might be good, but is it really the good? Are you pursuing the good in truth? Are we pursuing God in the good that he intends for us? And so I want to challenge you this week. Going back to that verse, the eye is the lamp of the body. If thine eye is single, thy whole body will be full of light. But it continues. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Now, I'm not saying that as people in a fallen world that we're ever going to get it perfect or right. The perfect will come, right? Eternity will sift out our motives. But in the here and now, we are called to be pure at heart, to will, to intend, to pursue God and the good he provides. And so, as with anything, we take baby steps, right? This is something that takes discipline. Humans are creatures of habit. It's not overnight that you switch from one habit to another, right? It takes discipline. It takes consistency. It takes effort. And so the challenge is to cultivate pure hearts. How can we do this? This is an ongoing process, but how can we start? How can we do this? My challenge to you this week, and feel free to carry it on beyond this week, but this is what we're talking about today, right? Identify something in your own life this week where thine eye, that is the intention of your heart, is not single, right? It lacks clarity. It lacks focus. Where you're not pursuing the good and truth. Identify something and then do something to align your actions and will with God's. This is going to take some reflection. I don't expect you to have an answer in your own mind right now. Maybe you do. Maybe there's something obvious in your life. But it might take some reflection and some thought and some prayer. So that's my challenge to you this week. Let us together continually cultivate a purity of heart. Let us seek clarity and focus in what we will and desire. That's all I have for you. Any questions? Any thoughts? 5 minutes over. Sorry, everyone. It was what? The 5 minutes. Yeah. All right. We're going to sing a closing song together, and then we'll wrap up. We'll go have lunch together. We can continue discussing this or other things.